My best friend told me she only befriended me to get closer to my boyfriend. The words hit me like ice water while I stood frozen in the bathroom stall at Murphy's Tavern. Through the thin door, I could hear Chloe's voice clearly as she talked to our colleague Jessica from accounting. The company happy hour was in full swing, and I ducked into the bathroom to fix my mascara after laughing too hard at David's joke about our boss. I was about to push open the door when Chloe started talking. "Emma's so naive," Chloe said, her voice carrying that familiar warmth I'd grown to love over 2 years of friendship. I became friends with her because I knew she'd introduce me to David eventually. Plus, she trusts me with everything: client strategies, presentation ideas. I've been documenting her methods to use when I get her promotion. She's too soft for leadership anyway. My hand gripped the door handle so hard my knuckles went white. Jessica's nervous laugh echoed off the bathroom tiles. "Chloe, that's kind of harsh. Emma's really sweet." "Sweet doesn't close million-dollar accounts," Chloe replied. "David deserves someone who actually understands ambition. Emma just coasts on her ideas without the drive to execute them properly. I've been showing him what real support looks like." I pressed my back against the stall wall, feeling like the floor might collapse beneath me. 2 years of friendship. 2 years of sharing everything: my hopes for the Morrison Industries account, my fears about meeting David's parents, my strategies for handling difficult clients. 2 years of Chloe being my closest confidant at Bradley and Associates. The bathroom door swung shut as they left, their voices fading into the bar noise. I stood there for another 5 minutes, staring at the graffiti scratched into the stall door, trying to process what I'd just heard. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Where'd you go? Chloe said you weren't feeling well." I walked back into the crowded bar on unsteady legs. David was sitting at our usual table, but Chloe had taken my seat next to him. She was leaning in close, her hand resting on his forearm as she spoke. When she saw me approaching, her face transformed into that bright, concerned expression I knew so well. "There you are. I was just telling David you looked pale earlier. Are you okay?" She stood up and wrapped me in one of her signature hugs, the kind that had always made me feel safe and supported. Now it felt like being embraced by a snake. "Just tired," I managed to say. "Long week." David studied my face with those deep brown eyes I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. "You do look exhausted. Maybe we should head home." "Actually, I was just suggesting David should take you home and pamper you a bit," Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You work so hard, Em. You deserve someone who takes care of you." The ride home was quiet. David kept glancing at me while he drove, probably wondering why I was staring out the window instead of chattering about office gossip like usual. When we got to my apartment, he followed me inside and sat on the couch while I poured myself a large glass of wine. "Okay, what's wrong?" he asked. "You've been weird since you came back from the bathroom." I wanted to tell him everything, but the words felt too big, too impossible. "How do you explain that your best friend has been systematically infiltrating your life for 2 years? That every intimate detail you'd shared, every vulnerable moment, every success you'd celebrated together was part of an elaborate con?" "Just work stuff," I said instead. "The Morrison presentation is next week, and I'm stressed." David nodded, but I could see the concern in his expression. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? Chloe mentioned you've been struggling with some of the bigger accounts lately." My wine glass stopped halfway to my lips. "Chloe said that? She's worried about you. Said you've been making some questionable strategic decisions lately." David reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know work is important to you, but maybe it's time to consider whether you're in over your head with some of these clients." The room felt like it was tilting. Chloe had been feeding him doubts about my competence. How long had this been going on? What else had she told him? I set down my wine glass with trembling fingers. "What kind of questionable decisions?" "Nothing major," David said quickly. "Just little things, like maybe being too aggressive with the Morrison pitch, or not reading client personalities well. She's just looking out for you." I excused myself and locked the bathroom door, then sat on the edge of the bathtub trying to breathe normally. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Hope you're feeling better. David seemed really concerned about you tonight. Lucky girl to have someone who cares so much about your well-being." That night, I lay awake replaying every conversation, every moment, every interaction from the past 2 years. Chloe had appeared in my life right after I'd started dating David. When I was the new hire desperate for friends at Bradley and Associates, she'd taken me under her wing, introduced me around, helped me navigate office politics. I'd been so grateful. Now I remembered how she'd always steered our conversations toward David, how she'd asked detailed questions about his work, his family, his hobbies, how she'd encouraged me to invite her to office parties where David would be, how she'd somehow always end up sitting next to him, laughing at his jokes, remembering details about his projects. Monday morning came too soon. I arrived at the office early, hoping to avoid Chloe, but she was already at her desk with 2 coffee cups waiting. She beamed at me as I approached, holding out my usual order vanilla latte with an extra shot. "Morning, sunshine? Feeling better?" She looked genuinely concerned, which made everything worse. How was she such a good actress? "I brought you your favorite. Figured you could use the caffeine after last night." "Thanks," I said, taking the coffee but not drinking it. Suddenly I was suspicious of everything, even her small kindnesses. "So, Morrison Industries," Chloe said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Big day coming up. I've been thinking about your presentation, and I have some ideas that might help." I studied her face, looking for cracks in the performance. "What kind of ideas?" admitted. "Well, you know how you tend to focus on the creative aspects? What if we shifted toward ROI projections instead? Clients like Morrison respond better to hard numbers." She pulled out a notebook covered in neat handwriting. I've been doing some research on their recent campaigns. My stomach clenched. The Morrison account was my biggest opportunity for the promotion we were both up for. And here was Chloe, positioning herself as my helpful collaborator, while simultaneously undermining my approach. I wondered how long she'd been documenting my strategies, like she'd mentioned in the bathroom. That's thoughtful, I said carefully. But I think I'll stick with my original concept. Something flickered across Chloe's expression too fast to identify. Of course. You know best. I just want to see you succeed, Em. That afternoon, I had lunch with David at the little Italian place near his architecture firm. He seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual. When I asked about his new residential project, he gave me a brief answer before changing the subject. Chloe texted me earlier, he said, twirling pasta around his fork. She's worried about how stressed you've been lately. Maybe you should take a weekend off after the Morrison presentation. Chloe texted you? The words came out sharper than I intended. David looked up, surprised by my tone. Yeah, she does sometimes. Just checking in about how you're doing. She cares about you. He paused. Is that weird? I thought you two were best friends. I forced a smile. We are. I'm just surprised she has your number. You gave it to her months ago, remember? When you were sick and couldn't make it to that client dinner. She offered to let me know how it went. I didn't remember that at all. But then again, Chloe was always volunteering to help with things. Always inserting herself into situations where she could be useful. Always finding ways to expand her access to my life. Back at the office, I waited until Chloe left for a meeting, then started looking through her desk drawers. I felt sick doing it, violating the trust of someone I'd considered my closest friend, but I needed to know how deep this went. In the bottom drawer, underneath a stack of client folders, I found a small leather notebook. My hands shook as I opened it. The first page was dated 2 years ago, just a few weeks after I'd started at Bradley & Associates. He seems lonely, eager for friendship. Recently started dating architect DV, could be useful. The entries continued. Documenting our growing friendship with clinical precision. Shared Morrison strategy notes, focusing too much on creativity, not enough on ROI. Could use this approach for my own presentation. Page after page of my personal information, my work strategies, my relationship details with David, notes about his favorite restaurants, his family dynamics, his career goals. Everything I'd shared with Chloe in confidence, cataloged like research data. Near the back of the notebook, I found printed copies of emails. Not just any emails between Chloe and David, going back months. My vision blurred as I read through them. Emma seemed really overwhelmed at dinner last night. I worry she's taking on more than she can handle at work. I appreciate you looking out for her, Chloe. She doesn't always recognize when she's in over her head. She mentioned the Morrison account is stressing her out. Maybe encourage her to be more collaborative? Sometimes I think she tries to do everything alone instead of asking for help. Each email showed Chloe subtly planting seeds of doubt while positioning herself as the concerned friend. She'd been systematically eroding David's confidence in me while building herself up as the more supportive, understanding woman in my life. I photographed every page with my phone, my hands trembling with rage and betrayal. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Chloe returned from her meeting an hour later, all smiles and cheerful energy. How was your afternoon? She asked. You look better, less stressed. Great, I said, my voice somehow steady. Really productive. That evening, I sat in my apartment scrolling through the photos of Chloe's notebook, trying to process the extent of her deception. Every memory felt contaminated now. The time she'd insisted on helping me prepare for my review, then used my preparation notes for her own presentation the following week. The way she'd always volunteered to cover my client calls when I was sick, giving her access to my relationships and strategies. The girls' nights where she'd encouraged me to vent about David, then apparently reported back to him that I didn't appreciate his support. The work trips where she'd somehow ended up in adjacent hotel rooms, always available to offer advice that seemed helpful, but actually undermined my confidence. My phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. Hey, he said, and his voice sounded different, more distant. I was thinking about our conversation at lunch. Maybe Chloe's right about you taking a break. You've been acting strange lately. Strange how? I don't know. Suspicious, I guess. Paranoid about normal things. Like today, when you got upset about Chloe texting me. We're all adults here, Em. Your friends care about you and they care about us. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, You're right. I'm just stressed about the presentation. That's another thing. Chloe mentioned you're being pretty stubborn about accepting help with Morrison. She offered to collaborate and you shut her down. That's not like you. When did Chloe tell you that? She called earlier. She's worried about you, Em. We both are. After we hung up, I sat in my dark living room trying to figure out my next move. Chloe had been playing a long game, and she was winning. She'd positioned herself as the concerned friend while systematically destroying my credibility with David and potentially sabotaging my career. And she was so good at it that even pointing out her behavior made me look paranoid and unstable. I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or misunderstanding. And I needed it before the Morrison presentation, which was now just 4 days away. The next morning, I arrived at the office extra early and logged into the security system. As a senior account executive, I had access to review footage for client security purposes I started with the previous Friday night when I'd worked late on the Morrison presentation. The timestamp showed 6:47 p.m. when I'd finally left the building. At 8:23 p.m., the cameras showed Chloe using her keycard to enter the building. She went straight to my desk, photographed documents with her phone, and accessed my computer. The footage showed her copying files onto a USB drive before leaving at 9:15 p.m. I downloaded the footage and saved it to my personal drive, then checked previous weeks. The pattern was consistent. Chloe returning to the office after hours, always going through my desk, always photographing my work. Sometimes she'd be there for just 15 minutes, sometimes over an hour. Armed with evidence, I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nauseated. This wasn't just workplace competition or opportunistic betrayal. This was systematic stalking, identity theft, relationship manipulation. Chloe hadn't just befriended me to get closer to David. She'd been stealing my entire professional identity while destroying my personal relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dinner tonight?" Chloe suggested this new place downtown. Thought it would be fun to try something different. Of course she had. Another opportunity for Chloe to play the supportive friend while positioning herself as the more adventurous, socially connected woman. Another chance to gather intelligence about my relationship while subtly highlighting my shortcomings. I texted back, "Can't tonight. Need to prep for Morrison." His response came quickly. "You're always working lately." This is exactly what Chloe was talking about. That afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with Marcus Webb, our department head, for Thursday morning right before the Morrison presentation. I needed someone in authority to see the evidence before Chloe could spin the narrative, but I also needed to be strategic about how I presented it. Coming across as vindictive or unstable would only prove Chloe's point about my leadership capabilities. Wednesday evening, Chloe knocked on my apartment door with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "Thought you could use some company before the big day tomorrow," she said, pushing past me into the living room. "You've been so isolated lately." I watched her move around my apartment with casual familiarity, setting out containers, opening wine, making herself at home in the space where I'd shared my deepest fears and insecurities with her. The performance was flawless concerned friend, supportive colleague, caring confidant. "You know," Chloe said, settling onto my couch with her wine glass, "I've been thinking about what happens after tomorrow. If Morrison goes well, you'll probably get the promotion. But if it doesn't?" She let the sentence hang. "If it doesn't? Well, Marcus has been asking me about taking on more senior responsibilities. I think he sees leadership potential." She smiled. "Not that I'm competing with you or anything, I just want what's best for the team." I stared at her, marveling at the audacity. She was literally telling me she was positioning herself to take my promotion, while framing it as casual conversation between friends. The gaslighting was so sophisticated, so expertly executed, that I almost doubted my own evidence. "That's great, Chloe. You'd make a good leader." "Thanks, Em. That means a lot coming from you." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know how much your friendship has meant to me. You've taught me so much about this business." Thursday morning came gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. I arrived at the office early to find Chloe already there, looking polished and confident in a sharp navy suit. She'd brought coffee for both of us again, along with a good luck card that read, "You've got this, superstar. Your friendship is the best part of working here." The Morrison presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. My meeting with Marcus was at 9:15. I walked to his office with a USB drive containing the security footage and photos of Chloe's notebook, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Marcus looked up from his computer as I entered. At 52, he was known for his direct communication style and low tolerance for office drama. This conversation would either vindicate me or destroy my career. "Emma, ready for Morrison?" "Actually, Marcus, I need to show you something first. It's about Chloe." His expression shifted to mild annoyance. "If this is about the promotion decision, that's premature. We haven't even seen your presentation yet. It's not about the promotion. It's about intellectual property theft and harassment." I plugged in the USB drive. "I need you to see this before I present to Morrison today." The security footage spoke for itself. Marcus watched in silence as Chloe repeatedly broke into my workspace, photographed documents, and accessed my computer. When I showed him photos of her notebook documenting my personal life and relationship details, his jaw tightened. "This is serious," he said finally. "How long has this been going on?" 2 years. Since I started here. I have more evidence if you need it." Marcus checked his watch. "We'll deal with this after Morrison. Can you present effectively, or do you need to postpone?" "I can present." "Good. Don't mention this to anyone else until we've had a full investigation. That includes Chloe." The Morrison Industries team arrived at 9:45. 3 executives in expensive suits, looking skeptical and checking their phones. This was my moment to prove that I deserved the promotion, that I was capable of handling major accounts. Everything I'd worked for came down to the next hour. I delivered my presentation with laser focus, channeling my anger into passion for the campaign concept. The creative approach I'd developed focused on Morrison's heritage and craftsmanship, positioning them as authentic luxury in an increasingly synthetic market. It was risky, emotional, and completely different from the ROI-focused strategy Chloe had suggested. The clients asked thoughtful questions, took detailed notes, and actually smiled at several points during my presentation. When I finished, the lead executive leaned forward. "This is exactly the kind of fresh thinking we need. When can you start implementation?" Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost laughed. I'd done it. Despite Chloe's sabotage, despite months of undermining, I'd secured the biggest account of my career. After the Morrison team left, Marcus called me back to his office. Chloe was sitting in the chair across from his desk, looking confused and slightly defensive. "Emma, please sit down." "Chloe, I've just shown Emma the evidence we discussed. Do you want to explain why you've been accessing her workspace and documents after hours?" Chloe's face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, calculation, then carefully constructed innocence. "I'm not sure what you mean. Marcus, Emma, and I collaborate on everything." She's always sharing her strategies with me. Then explain this. Marcus played the security footage on his computer screen. We all watched as Chloe used her keycard to enter the building, went straight to my desk, and photographed documents. Oh, that. Chloe's laugh sounded forced. Emma asked me to grab some files she'd forgotten. She was working from home that day because she wasn't feeling well. On multiple occasions over several months, Chloe's composure cracked slightly. We're very close. Emma depends on me for a lot of support, both professional and personal. Sometimes she gets overwhelmed and needs help organizing her work. Marcus turned his computer screen toward Chloe, showing photos of her notebook. And this? Documenting Emma's personal relationship and using that information to contact her boyfriend behind her back? This time, Chloe's silence stretched too long. I could see her trying to calculate an explanation that would minimize the damage. Finally, she looked directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, devoid of any warmth or affection. Emma's been struggling, she said. Anyone can see that. Her work has been inconsistent. Her relationship is unstable. And she's been making poor decisions. I was trying to help by coordinating with David to support her better. By telling him I was incompetent and didn't appreciate him, the words came out before I could stop them. Chloe's mask finally slipped completely. You are incompetent. You got this job because you're pleasant and non-threatening. Not because you're qualified. I've been carrying you for 2 years, fixing your mistakes, covering for your weaknesses. The Morrison presentation you just gave, half those ideas came from our conversations. Which conversations? The ones you documented in your notebook to steal later? Steal? Chloe stood up, her voice rising. You couldn't execute a strategy if your life depended on it. You're a middle management mediocrity who got lucky with one client presentation. David sees it, Marcus sees it, everyone sees it except you. Marcus held up his hand. That's enough. Chloe, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you out after you've cleared your personal items from your desk. You're making a mistake, Chloe said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Emma's not leadership material. She'll never be able to handle the pressure of senior responsibilities. After Chloe was escorted out, Marcus and I sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. The Morrison presentation was excellent. Exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need in senior roles. Congratulations on the promotion. Thank you. That said, this situation with Chloe is unprecedented. We'll need to review all your joint projects to ensure intellectual property boundaries were maintained, and there will likely be legal implications. I nodded, feeling drained. The victory felt hollow after everything that had happened. I'd gotten the promotion and the account, but at the cost of discovering that my closest friendship had been an elaborate deception. That evening, David came over with flowers and champagne, ready to celebrate my Morrison success. I told him everything about Chloe's notebook, the security footage, the systematic manipulation. He listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions or requesting clarification. I feel like an idiot, he said finally. She played me completely. All those conversations about you being overwhelmed or making poor decisions, I actually started doubting your capabilities. That was the point. How long do you think she was planning this? I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of the notebook entries. From the beginning. She targeted me specifically because of you, then decided to steal my career as a bonus. David stared at the evidence, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that looked like fear. This is stalking. This is criminal behavior. I know. We sat on my couch drinking champagne that tasted like victory and betrayal in equal measure. Everything felt different now, like I was seeing my life from the outside. The apartment where I'd hosted Chloe countless times, the couch where she'd consoled me through bad days and celebrated good ones, the kitchen where we'd cooked dinner together while she gathered intelligence about my relationship. What happens now? David asked. Legal review, probably police involvement, definitely therapy. I leaned against his shoulder. I keep wondering how long it would have gone on if I hadn't overheard her in the bathroom. She was so patient, so methodical. She would have destroyed me slowly enough that I never would have realized what was happening. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but you have no idea how deep this goes. Check your email. David and I exchanged glances. I opened my email to find a message from Chloe's personal account, sent just minutes before. The subject line read, "What Emma doesn't want you to know." The email was addressed to David, Marcus, the Morrison Industries team, and several other colleagues. It contained carefully edited excerpts from our private conversations over 2 years, taken completely out of context to make me appear incompetent, emotionally unstable, and professionally unethical. Screenshots of text messages where I'd vented about difficult clients, photos of notes from my desk that she'd apparently taken during her break-ins, and audio recordings of me complaining about work stress during our private dinners. She recorded our conversations, I said, my voice barely audible. She recorded me in my own apartment. David's face went white. How is that legal? It's not. I forwarded the email to Marcus immediately, then called him despite the late hour. I saw it, he said before I could speak. Legal is already involved. This crosses several lines into criminal harassment and corporate espionage. Don't respond to anything she sends, and document every contact attempt. Over the next week, the investigation expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. It discovered that Chloe had installed keylogger software on my work computer. Giving her access to all my passwords and communication security footage from the building garage showed her following me home on multiple occasions. Her notebook contained detailed schedules of my daily routines, David's work schedule, and even my parents' visiting patterns. The Morrison Industries team, rather than being deterred by Chloe's malicious email, were horrified by the evidence of corporate espionage and increased their contract value as a show of support. Other colleagues came forward with their own stories of Chloe making inappropriate comments about my work or gathering information about my personal life. Most disturbing was the discovery that I wasn't Chloe's first target. HR found a complaint from her previous company about similar behavior toward a female colleague who'd been dating someone Chloe wanted. The pattern suggested a systematic predator who used workplace relationships to gain access to victims' personal lives. Chloe was arrested on charges of corporate espionage, harassment, and illegal surveillance. During the legal proceedings, more evidence emerged showing the depth of her manipulation. She'd created fake social media accounts to monitor my activity, had been tracking my location through a fitness app we shared, and had even contacted David's ex-girlfriend to gather information about his preferences in relationships. The criminal trial took 8 months. I testified about the friendship, the gradual undermining, the discovery of the notebook. The prosecutor painted a picture of calculated psychological warfare designed to isolate and destabilize me while positioning Chloe as a replacement in both my professional and personal life. Chloe's defense attorney tried to frame her behavior as overzealous friendship and workplace competition, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Standing in that courtroom as the judge sentenced Chloe to 18 months in prison plus restitution and a restraining order, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years: complete safety. The woman who had infiltrated every aspect of my life, who had turned my trust into a weapon against me, could no longer hurt me. David and I didn't survive the aftermath. The discovery that our entire relationship had been under surveillance, that every private moment had been reported back to someone who wanted to destroy us, created a paranoia we couldn't overcome. We tried therapy, tried dating again, but the damage went too deep. We ended things amicably 6 months after the trial, both of us needing space to rebuild our ability to trust. 3 years later, I run the Morrison Industries account from my own boutique agency, working with clients who value authentic relationships over corporate manipulation. The experience taught me to recognize predatory behavior, to trust my instincts when something feels wrong, and to understand that not all monsters announce themselves with obvious cruelty. Some of them bring coffee every morning, remember your birthday, and learn to replicate love while feeling none of it themselves. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.